All right, welcome to the first chapter of our book. Well, so for chapter 1, we're gonna have an overview of business research. In particular, I just want to further convince you that business research can be very important and can be very helpful. So let me start with an example here, ESPN. Okay, I know ESPN must be very familiar to you guys, at least most of you. I'm not a big fan of sports events, but at least I know there are many channels offered by ESPN on television, on cable, and there's also internet offered by ESPN. Also has its internet website. So for ESPN, it has a lot of information in many databases, a lot of information in various channels. ESPN can collect data information on its viewers through the internet viewing or through the television viewing, right? Now, business research can help ESPN to learn better about their fans, how they use their media. Okay, after all, ESPN can make money by selling products to its fans, right? It can earn profits by providing programs that the viewers are interested in. And in that way, it will attract more companies to put commercials in their channels. So to do that, apparently ESPN need to make good use of their databases. They could gather and organize their databases together to shape their fans group, their customer group, the customer's age, the programs that they watch more, the products that they like to purchase from ESPN, etc. Okay, so to kind of provide a summary and to provide information about the ESPN's customers, apparently we need data together with statistical analysis. Okay, so and that is one part of business research. Okay. So what is business research? Business research is the application of the scientific method in searching for the truth about the business phenomena. There are a few keywords I want to call for your attention. First of all, is the application of the scientific method. So apparently, when you conduct business research to help you make better business decisions, you are not following your guts. You're not following your intuition. Instead, you need to use a scientific method. Okay, I will have a detailed explanation about specific scientific method later, but this is not something you just come up in your mind right away. Now, the process of business research basically include the following. First of all, you have an idea, right? Either you observe something going on with the current business, or you think there's potential opportunity for the business to explore. For these situations, you have an idea or you have the necessity to conduct business research. And you also want to refer to theory, if there's any, to help you guide you through the research. The next step is usually you want to define the problem. Okay, what issues are you looking at? What opportunities are you looking at? And the next step is to search for and collect information. Once you have the data, analyze data, and eventually you have your findings, you need to communicate your findings effectively. All right. Now, throughout this course, I'm gonna assume, and you should do the same thing, I'm gonna assume you are the researcher for a company. Okay, you are a senior researcher for a company. Okay, and you report to senior managers or you report to the executives. And therefore, you do need to be able to communicate your findings effectively and concisely. And this is why, if you can recall in my syllabus as well as the research prospectus guideline, I emphasize that you need to write concisely. Okay, I do not prefer long writing. I prefer you write concisely, to the point, and direct. This saying probably further explain why business research is important. It says it aren't the things we don't know that gets in trouble. It's the things we know that aren't so. Now, there are tons of situations where we thought we know how business is going, okay? And we just follow our heart or follow our guts, okay? Yes, there are people who succeeded doing that way, but there are also people who failed doing that way. Now, with business research, okay, we could form a better decision with a higher chance of being successful. That's what business research is about. It's not a guaranteed success, but it could help you to make better decisions, okay? It could help you to get correct idea about what's going on. So there are things we might think is going this way, but actually not. And business research sometimes can help us correct that opinion or idea. Okay, so here's scientific method in details. For the scientific method, the core of scientific method is really the hypothesis and this test, what I usually call hypothesis testing. Okay, now when you try to address an issue for a company, or when you want to explore an opportunity for a company, apparently you should have some prior knowledge about the situation, about the company, and then you observe something happening. You could observe falling sales, you could observe high turnover rate, you could observe that there's opportunity overseas for the company to expand. All those observations will lead you to say, well, it's time for me to conduct business research. Then to do the business research, you need to form a statement about what you believe to be true, okay? And that is the hypothesis. If you believe, for example, treating employees better will increase employee loyalty, if that's your belief, okay, you could take this statement and test it. That's the hypothesis. Test whether the statement is true or not. If you believe the opportunity overseas can be a good one, can help you improve the company's image, or can help increase profit, then that is a statement for you to test. You need to actually collect data to find out whether that's true or not. So once such statement is tested, it is either supported by the data or not, then you can make a conclusion, and that's your new knowledge. Maybe the new opportunity is not as good as you thought. Maybe the opportunity is a good one. You can go ahead and explore overseas. So that is the scientific method. And again, the core is to conduct hypothesis test to verify certain statement you have is true or not. Here's the managerial value of business research. Now, instead of going through this theory-like content, I would like to talk about this example, business class success. Okay? So, I believe we all at some point travel by airline. Actually, I just came back from China, and the one flight I have is 14 hours from Beijing to Houston. I cannot say that's a fun flight. It's awfully long. It's boring. It's tiring. So if I can afford, I definitely want to travel business. Unfortunately, I don't think that would happen anytime soon or even in my life. But anyway, business class travelers definitely want comfort. They want good food and they want convenient boarding. They want a lot of privileges. However, they do pay a high price for such good service, right? On the other hand, economy class is cheap, but then it's crowding. The food is not so good. I never heard people saying that food on airline is great. So there are two companies, two startups think, well, what about we combine the two? What about we offer a discount business class only airline, okay? And in this airline, they compromise on each end. The price is higher than economy class, but it is more comfortable than the economy class. And at the same time, the room for each seat is not as spacious as for the regular business class. Okay, good idea actually. They surveyed potential consumers before such things are offered, and they got really overwhelming positive feedback. People say this is a great idea. They would definitely try. They're interested. However, eventually both companies failed. One thing later on, after the two companies failed, of course, there are studies looking at the reasons why such a good idea could fail, why people originally saying that they're gonna try and they're interested, eventually it turns out not supporting such business. One reason, according to a research, is that the business class only airline failed to provide power plug. Now think about it. For this business class only airline, right? Who would fly on it? Most likely business people, right? Business travelers. And business travelers means they are doing business. They're taking a business trip. And most likely they will take their work with them. Or at least many of them will take their laptop and use their laptop. And if you don't provide a power plug, okay, it will be quite frustrating if the power went off on the computer, okay? So here, for this situation, okay, it's a case where, yes, they did business research. However, it might not be a thorough one, okay? Maybe more effective research could have determined that providing power plug is necessary, or better business research could have determined that these are not good business ventures at all. So here's a situation where it's not a firm answer, but maybe more effective research can help it. Another example right here is about Harley-Davidson. Harley-Davidson once considered to go abroad and actually considered Indian market. I've never been there myself, so I can only say from what I've seen from the media, but it seems like motorcycle is very common in India, everywhere. And Harley-Davidson says, well, why don't we take a share there and go abroad? Well, they actually did research on Indian market, and they found that consumers do want their motorcycle. Unfortunately, the government regulations make it prohibitive. Actually, the Indian government would like to levy such high taxes on the motorcycle, and Harley-Davidson decided eventually this is not a good plan. They instead actually is pursuing the US women's market for bikes. I didn't follow up with this situation. The textbook didn't provide any follow-up. So I'm not quite sure how it's doing in the women's market. If you're interested, you might want to take a look. Okay. The last example I want to talk about is Jack Daniels. I picked this example for two reasons. It's in the textbook. Number one, I once studied, I had my PhD from University of Tennessee. So I had the opportunity to visit Jack Daniels. I don't drink myself, but visiting the place is quite a fun trip. I still remember the trip. We drove for probably 2 hours plus for nothing. There's nothing on the road. We're driving along the mountain, and suddenly we saw this Jack Daniel factory. It's really a good place to hide. If you know the history, in the old days, right, when you make alcohol drinks, you need to hide from the regulation. So anyway, that's one reason. The other reason is it seems like the authors, at least one of them, is quite into drinking. So Jack Daniels also think about going abroad. Apparently, the company needs to know what other customers are doing in different countries. What they find is Japanese is using Jack Daniel as a dinner beverage. Okay, Australians drink distilled spirits at home, and British like to drink at bars and restaurants. So people are different in different countries. I'm quite interested in the last one, actually. Chinese prefer knockoffs to save money. I quite agree. Jack Daniel is super expensive in China. We do have knockoffs. And there are people that are quite into alcohol so that they just want a quick result. Okay, so knockoff serves perfect. I do have something about this part. It says Chinese enjoy it with green tea. I'm not sure about the research. However, as a Chinese myself and knowing quite a few people who are into drinking, I've never heard this. I've never heard that they are drinking knockoffs or other distilled spirits with green tea. That we love tea, we also love alcohol, but I don't know how these two can go together. However, last semester, when I was talking about this example, I had a student in the class who lived in Japan for a couple of years, and she said, actually, according to her observation, that's what's going on in Japan. Okay, I'm not saying that the research is totally wrong, but my point here is that if what she stated and what I observed are correct, then apparently this research finding is misleading, right? And recall the business class airline situation, right? You do want to conduct really effective and accurate research to help you with better business decisions. If the research is not of high quality, it could be misleading, and that could be costly to the business. Okay. So that with this example, that is the end of chapter 1. I'm recording this just because honestly I forgot to turn on the recording at the beginning of this lecture tonight. So I'm recording again. For the next 3 chapters, chapters 2 to 4, they are discussed in the next recording. So if you have time, go ahead and start the other one. I'll talk to you next.